Princess Zarakai stood in the center of the great crystal hall. Her purple skin shimmered under the bright lights that came from the walls themselves. The hall was huge, bigger than most buildings on other worlds. Everything was made of white crystal that glowed with its own light. This was the heart of the ethereal empire, and today it would decide her fate. Around her sat the High Council. 12 of the most powerful ethereals in the galaxy looked down at her from their floating seats. Their eyes glowed with the same purple light that ran through their veins. Each one could read minds from across a room. Each one could move objects with just a thought. They were the rulers of 1,000 worlds. At the highest seat sat her father, Emperor Vexthul. His crown was made of pure energy that flickered like fire around his head. His face showed no emotion as he looked at his daughter. To him, she was no longer family. She was a problem that needed to be solved. "You stand accused of treason," her father said. His voice echoed through the hall even though he spoke softly. "You have spoken against the natural order. You have questioned our right to rule over lesser beings." Zarakai lifted her chin. She would not show fear even now. "I have spoken for peace, father. I have asked why we must conquer when we could cooperate." A wave of angry thoughts hit her mind. The council members were sharing their disgust without speaking. To them, her words were like poison. The ethereals had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had taken world after world, making slaves of every species they found. It was their way. It was their right. "Lesser species exist to serve us," said Council Member Mordak. His mental voice was like ice in her head. "They cannot think as we think. They cannot do what we do. They are animals with just enough intelligence to be useful." "That is not true," Zarakai said. "I have studied the reports from our border worlds. Some species have technology we do not understand. Others have solved problems in ways we never thought of. If we worked with them instead of enslaving them—" "Enough!" Her father's shout made the crystal walls ring like bells. "You speak like a child who has never seen war. You think these creatures will be grateful for our mercy? You think they will serve us willingly if we ask nicely? I think they might surprise us if we gave them the chance." The Emperor stood up from his throne. Energy crackled around his hands. For a moment, Zarakai thought he might kill her right there. Instead, he walked down the steps until he stood in front of her. "You are my daughter," he said quietly. "I have given you every advantage. The best teachers, the finest education, access to all the knowledge of our empire. And this is what you have learned? That we should bow down to creatures that live in dirt and fight with metal sticks? I have learned that strength comes in many forms, father. Not just the kind that destroys." Her father's eyes flashed with anger. Around the hall, the council members leaned forward. Some smiled with cruel pleasure. They had never liked the princess. She asked too many questions. She spent too much time reading reports from distant worlds instead of learning how to rule with an iron fist. "You want to know about other forms of strength?" the Emperor asked. "Let me show you." He reached out with his mind and grabbed her thoughts. For a moment, Zarakai felt her father inside her head, looking at her memories. He saw her secret meetings with the few council members who shared her doubts. He saw her private studies of alien cultures. He saw her growing belief that the ethereal way was wrong. When he pulled back, his face was cold as space. "You are not just wrong, daughter. You are dangerous. Your thoughts are a disease that could spread to others. Weak minds might listen to your words and begin to doubt. I cannot allow that. So you will kill me for thinking differently? No, death would make you a martyr. Others might remember your words and think you died for something noble. Instead, I will show everyone what happens to those who question our way." The Emperor turned to face the council. "My daughter believes that lesser species have something to teach us. She thinks we should learn from creatures that cannot even read thoughts or move objects with their minds. Very well. Let her go live among such creatures and see how long her ideals last." Council member Tekvar spoke up. "What world do you have in mind, Emperor?" "Kepler 442b, her father said. The name sent chills through everyone in the hall. "A world so dangerous that even our scout ships avoid it. The forests are filled with creatures that hunt in packs. The plants themselves are poisonous. The weather can kill an unprotected being in minutes. It is perfect." Zarakai felt her heart sink. Kepler 442b was a death sentence. No ethereal had ever survived there for more than a few days. The wildlife was too aggressive, the environment too hostile. It was a world where only the strongest and most brutal creatures could live. "You will be given basic survival gear," her father continued. "Nothing more. If your beliefs about cooperation and peace are correct, perhaps you will find allies among the local wildlife. Perhaps the poisonous plants will choose to help you instead of kill you. The council members laughed. It was a cold sound that echoed off the crystal walls. And if I survive? Zarakai asked. If I prove that there are other ways to live? Then you may return and tell us all about it, her father said. But know this. If you set foot in ethereal space again without my permission, you will be killed on sight. This is not just banishment, daughter. This is the end of your life as you know it. 2 guards stepped forward. They were massive ethereals, bred for war instead of thought. Their minds were simple and focused on one thing, following orders. They took Zarakai by the arms and began to lead her away. As they walked toward the door, she heard her father speak one last time. Take her to the edge of our territory. Give her the basic gear we promised. Then leave her on that world and never speak of her again. As far as the Empire is concerned, Princess Zarakai died today. The great doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Zarakai walked through the halls where she had grown up, seeing them for the last time. Servants and nobles turned away as she passed. Word had already spread. She was no longer royalty. She was no longer family. She was nothing. 3 hours later, she stood in the cargo bay of a military transport ship. A pile of basic survival gear lay at her feet. Water purification tablets, a simple shelter, some ration packs, a knife. It was barely enough to survive for a week, let alone build a new life. The ship's captain, a scarred veteran named Korthek, looked at her with something that might have been pity. I served with your father in the border wars, he said quietly. He was a good soldier then, but power changes people. Will you tell me about Kepler 442b? She asked. It is a green world with thick forests and wide rivers. The trees grow tall and the air is breathable. It looks beautiful from space, he paused. But beauty can be deadly. The creatures there hunt in packs. They are smart and they are hungry. The plants have thorns filled with poison. Even the water can kill you if you drink from the wrong stream. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the viewport, Zarakai saw a green and blue world hanging in the darkness. It looked peaceful. She knew that was an illusion. Any advice? She asked. Stay away from anything that moves, Korthek said. Trust nothing. Question everything. And if you hear howling at night, run. The transport ship's shuttle bay opened. A small escape pod waited for her. It would take her down to the surface and then self-destruct, making sure she had no way to leave. As the pod launched toward the forest world below, Zarakai closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for whatever was waiting. She had wanted to prove that there were other ways to live besides conquest and domination. Now she would have the chance to test that belief with her life. The escape pod hit the forest floor with a crash that shook Zarakai's bones. Metal groaned and bent as the small ship pushed through thick tree branches and finally stopped against a massive trunk. Smoke rose from the damaged engines. Within minutes, the pod's self-destruct system activated, leaving only twisted metal and a small crater. Zarakai crawled out of the wreckage with her survival pack. Her purple skin was cut in several places and her head pounded from the rough landing. But she was alive. The forest around her was quiet except for the sound of wind in the leaves high above. Tall trees stretched up so far she could barely see the sky. Everything was green and brown and filled with shadows. She had never been alone before. As a princess, there had always been servants, guards, or teachers nearby. Even on other worlds, she had traveled with full military escorts. Now there was only her in the wilderness. The silence felt heavy and strange. Her first day was spent learning basic lessons the hard way. The water in a clear stream looked safe, but when she dipped her finger in it and tasted a drop, her tongue went numb for an hour. The bright red berries on nearby bushes smelled sweet, but her telepathic senses detected something wrong about them. When she threw one at a small lizard, the creature writhed for a few seconds and then went still. Everything here wanted to kill her. By the third day, she had learned to use her abilities to test things before touching them. Her telepathy could sense the basic emotions of animals: hunger, fear, aggression. Her energy manipulation let her heat water to make it safe to drink and create small barriers to keep insects away. But using her powers made her tired and weak. Without the energy chambers and enhancement devices of ethereal cities, she could only do so much. The first major predator found her on the 5th day. Zarakai was gathering what she hoped were edible roots when her telepathic senses screamed danger. Something big was watching her from the thick bushes nearby. She could feel its hunger like a cold weight in her mind. Whatever it was, it saw her as food. She backed away slowly, trying not to make sudden movements. The creature followed, staying hidden but getting closer. Through the gaps in the leaves, she caught glimpses of gray hide covered in natural armor plates. It was the size of a small transport vehicle, with 6 legs and a head full of sharp teeth. The locals called them thornmaws, though she would not learn that name for months. The beast charged when she turned to run. Zarakai threw up an energy barrier just as the creature leaped. The impact sent her flying backwards into a tree. Her barrier flickered and died. The thornmaw landed heavily and turned to face her again, its small eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. She hit it with a bolt of energy that would have stunned most creatures. The thornmaw just shook its head and kept coming. Its hide was too thick, its nervous system too alien for her attacks to work properly. She ran deeper into the forest with the beast crashing through the undergrowth behind her. Only a river stopped the chase. The thornmaw would not cross the fast-moving water. It stood on the far bank for an hour, watching her with patient hunger before finally moving away to hunt easier prey. That night, Zarakai did not sleep. She sat with her back against a tree, listening to the sounds of the forest. Somewhere in the darkness, things howled and screamed and died. The thornmaw was not the only predator here. It might not even be the most dangerous one. Weeks passed. She learned to build better shelters using branches and mud. She found a few plants that were safe to eat, though they tasted terrible and provided little nutrition. Her telepathy helped her avoid the larger predators, but there were so many of them. Thornmaws hunted in packs. Flying creatures with razor-sharp claws nested in the trees above. Things that looked like giant spiders built webs between the trees and waited for prey to wander into them. Her royal clothes fell apart from daily wear and constant repairs. She made new ones from plant fibers and animal hide. Though they were rough and uncomfortable, her purple skin darkened from constant exposure to the sun. Her hands, once soft and smooth, became hard and scarred from working with tools and fighting off small predators. The worst part was the hunger. The safe plants provided barely enough nutrition to keep her alive. She lost weight rapidly, her body consuming itself to survive. Her energy powers grew weaker as her physical condition declined. Soon she could barely manage to heat water or create small lights. The thought of hunting the local animals crossed her mind many times. But every creature she encountered was either too dangerous to approach or too poisonous to eat safely. 3 months after her arrival, Zarakai was dying slowly. She had found a small cave near a stream that seemed relatively safe, but she knew it was only temporary. The predators were getting bolder. They had learned her scent and her habits. Soon they would coordinate an attack she could not escape. She sat outside her cave on a warm morning, watching the forest and thinking about her father. He had been right in one way. This world was testing every belief she had ever held. But he had been wrong about what she would learn. The creatures here were not mindless animals. They worked together. They planned. They adapted to new challenges. The thornmaws, for example, had learned to hunt in larger packs when they realized she could sense individuals approaching. The spider creatures had started building their webs across paths she used regularly. Even the plants seemed to be adapting, growing in patterns that herded prey toward the most dangerous areas. Everything here fought to survive, but they also worked together when it benefited them. She had seen different species cooperate when larger threats appeared. Birds warned ground animals of flying predators. Some plants provided shelter for creatures that helped spread their seeds. The forest was not just a collection of individual killers. It was a community where everyone had a role to play. But understanding the system and surviving in it were two different things. Zarakai was an outsider who did not fit anywhere in the natural order. She was not strong enough to be a predator, not fast enough to be prey that could escape, and not useful enough to be worth protecting. On the day that would change everything, she was foraging near the edge of her territory when her telepathic senses picked up something impossible. A pack of 5 thornmaws was moving through the forest in her direction. That was not unusual. She had been avoiding larger packs for weeks. But these 5 were moving with unusual coordination, as if they were following a plan. She tried to circle around them, but found more thornmaws waiting in every direction she turned. They had surrounded her while she was focused on the first group. Her telepathy showed her their intentions clearly. They were not just hunting. They were executing a coordinated strategy, designed specifically to catch her. The pack leaders had been watching her for weeks, learning her patterns and escape routes. Now they were ready to end the hunt that had been going on since her first day in the forest. Zarakai ran toward the one gap in their circle, but it closed before she could reach it. The Thornmaws moved in from all sides, their mental voices filled with satisfaction and hunger. She was trapped in a small clearing with nowhere to go. She gathered what little energy she had left and prepared to fight. It would not be enough. She knew that. But she would not die quietly like some helpless prey animal. If nothing else, she would prove that ethereals did not give up easily. The pack leader, a massive creature with old scars across its armored hide, stepped into the clearing. Behind it came the others, moving slowly and carefully. They knew she was dangerous in small ways. They would not take unnecessary risks. That was when her telepathic senses detected something else moving through the forest, something that made no sense at all. It was a mind unlike anything she had ever encountered. Chaotic but focused, alien but somehow familiar. Most strangely, she could barely sense it at all. It was like trying to read thoughts through thick metal walls. The Thornmaws sensed it too, their heads turned toward the sound of someone or something moving through the forest nearby. For the first time since the hunt began, their attention was not entirely focused on her. Whatever was coming, it was about to change everything. The strange mind moved closer through the forest. Zarakai tried to focus her telepathy on it, but it was like trying to grab smoke with her hands. She could sense that something intelligent was there, but she could not read its thoughts or emotions the way she could with other creatures. It was completely alien to her experience. The Thornmaws were getting nervous. Their pack leader made a low growling sound that meant, unknown threat approaching. These creatures had lived in the forest for generations. They knew every predator and prey species on the planet. Whatever was coming was something new. The sound of breaking branches got louder. Then a figure stepped into the clearing, and Zarakai's breath caught in her throat. It was obviously intelligent, walking upright on two legs like an ethereal, but it looked completely different from any species she knew about. Its skin was pale pink instead of purple, and it had strange hair growing from the top of its head. It wore clothes made from materials she did not recognize. Most importantly, it was carrying weapons that looked primitive but effective. A long knife hung from its belt. In its hands was some kind of projectile weapon, not an energy rifle like ethereals used, but something that fired solid objects. The creature, the being, looked around the clearing and quickly understood the situation. 5 large predators had surrounded one smaller being. It did not take advanced intelligence to figure out what was happening. "Well, this looks like fun," the stranger said in a language Zarakai had never heard before, but somehow she understood the tone. It was not afraid. If anything, it sounded almost amused. The pack leader Thornmaw turned to face this new threat. It was bigger than the stranger and covered in natural armor that could stop most attacks. It had claws that could tear through metal and teeth that could crush bones. By all logic, the newcomer should have run away immediately. Instead, the stranger raised its weapon and fired. The sound was sharp and loud, nothing like the quiet hum of energy weapons. Something small and fast hit the Thornmaw in the shoulder, right at the joint where its armor plates met. The creature roared in pain and anger but did not fall. The stranger had not even tried to kill it with one shot. "Yeah, that's what I thought," the stranger muttered, already moving to the side as the wounded Thornmaw charged. "Thick hide, armor plating, but joints are vulnerable." "Good to know." The attack came faster than Zarakai expected. The Thornmaw was a blur of gray hide and flashing claws. But the stranger was not there when the creature reached the spot where it had been standing. Somehow it had moved aside at exactly the right moment and fired another shot into the Thornmaw's back leg. The other 4 Thornmaws decided this new arrival was a bigger threat than their original prey. They spread out and began to circle the stranger, using the same coordinated hunting tactics they had planned to use on Zarakai. What happened next changed everything Zarakai thought. She knew about combat. The stranger did not try to fight all 5 creatures at once. Instead, it moved constantly, using the trees and rocks in the clearing to break up the pack's coordination. When one Thornmaw charged, the stranger would dodge behind a tree trunk, forcing the creature to slow down or risk hitting the obstacle. When 2 attacked from different directions, it would position itself so they got in each other's way. Every few seconds, the stranger would fire its weapon. But it never wasted shots trying to kill the heavily armored creatures outright. Instead, it aimed for joints, eyes, and feet. Each hit weakened the Thornmaws and made them slower and clumsier. "Come on, ugly." The stranger called to the pack leader. Your turn. The biggest thorn maw, bleeding from several wounds but still dangerous, gathered itself for a final charge. This time it would not miss. This time it would crush this annoying little creature, and then finish its original prey. The stranger waited until the last possible second, then dropped to one knee and fired upward. The projectile hit the thorn maw under its chin, in the one spot where its armor was thinnest. The creature's charge turned into an uncontrolled tumble that ended with it lying still at the stranger's feet. The remaining 4 thorn maws looked at their dead pack leader, then at the strange being who had killed it. Predators were smart enough to know when a hunt had gone wrong. They melted back into the forest, carrying their wounded with them. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of the stranger reloading its weapon. It checked the dead thorn maw to make sure it was really dead, then looked around until its eyes met Zarakai's. You okay? It asked. Zarakai realized she was staring with her mouth open. She closed it and tried to think of something to say. How did you do that? Do what? Fight those things. The stranger shrugged. Armor's tough, but it has gaps. They're strong, but they're not very smart. Basic tactics, really. Basic? Zarakai stood up slowly, still not quite believing what she had seen. You killed a creature that my people consider one of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Your people? The stranger's eyes narrowed. What are you exactly? You look humanoid, but that skin color is definitely not natural for humans. I was an ethereal. She was not sure how to explain her situation. My name is Zarakai. I am stranded on this world. Ethereal. The stranger repeated the word thoughtfully. Never heard of your species. I'm Marcus Chen, by the way. Human. And I'm stranded here too, at least for now. Human. Zarakai tested the unfamiliar word. I have never heard of your species either. Where are you from? Earth, originally. But I've been traveling around this part of the galaxy for a while. Marcus looked at the forest around them. This planet wasn't exactly on my travel plans. My ship got damaged and I had to make an emergency landing. Been here about 2 days. 2 days? Zarakai could not hide her amazement. You have survived here for only 2 days and you can already fight thorn maws? Is that what they're called? Thorn maws? Marcus nudged the dead creature with his foot. Makes sense. Those teeth could definitely tear you up, but they're not that different from some of the predators back home. Same basic principles apply. He looked at her more carefully, taking in her rough clothes and thin appearance. How long have you been here? 3 months. 3 months and you're still alive? Now it was Marcus's turn to look impressed. That's actually pretty amazing. This place is definitely trying to kill everything that moves. What happened to your ship? It was destroyed after landing. She paused, not sure how much to tell this stranger. I was exiled here by my own people. Exiled. Marcus's expression became more serious. That's rough. What did you do? I disagreed with the way my people treat other species, and they dumped you on a death world for that? Marcus shook his head. Your people sound like real charmers. Something in his tone made Zarakai defensive. The Ethereals are the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. We have technologies and abilities that other species cannot imagine. Uh-huh. Marcus looked around the clearing again, and yet here you are, nearly starving to death on a planet full of monsters. How's that advanced civilization working out for you? Before Zarakai could respond, the sound of howling echoed through the forest. It was still daylight, but the night hunters were waking up early. The smell of blood from the dead thorn maw would attract scavengers and worse things. We should move, Marcus said. Do you have a safe place nearby? I have a cave about half a mile from here, but it is not very safe. It'll have to do for now. Marcus pulled out a knife and began cutting strips of meat from the dead thorn maw. At least we'll have protein tonight. You cannot eat that. Zarakai was horrified. Thorn maw meat is poisonous to most species. Maybe to your species, Marcus said, continuing to work. But humans can eat almost anything if you prepare it right. Fire kills most toxins, and I've got some chemical neutralizers in my pack. He wrapped the meat in some kind of waterproof material and shouldered his pack. Lead the way to this cave of yours. We can talk more when we're somewhere secure. As they walked through the forest, Zarakai kept glancing at her unexpected rescuer. Marcus moved through the wilderness like he belonged there, reading the forest signs and avoiding dangers she had not even noticed. His mind remained completely unreadable to her telepathy, which was both disturbing and strangely liberating. For the first time since her exile began, she was not alone. And for the first time in her life, she was traveling with someone whose thoughts she could not read. It was terrifying and exciting at the same time. She had no idea that this meeting would change not just her life, but the future of the entire galaxy. The cave was small and damp, barely large enough for 2 people. But it was hidden behind a waterfall which helped mask their scent from predators. Zarakai had chosen it because most of the local creatures avoided running water. She had not known why until Marcus explained it to her. The sound of the waterfall covers other noises, he said as he built a small fire near the cave entrance. Predators can't hunt as well if they can't hear their prey moving around. Smart choice. It was luck, Zarakai admitted. I have been learning by trial and error. Best way to learn, really. Marcus had somehow managed to get the fire going using just sticks and dried leaves. Zarakai had been using her energy powers to start fires, which left her tired and weak. Trial and error teaches you things you can't learn from books. He began preparing the thornmaw meat, cutting it into small pieces and treating them with chemicals from his pack. The smell made Zarakai's stomach turn, but she was fascinated by his methods. Everything he did seemed simple, but she could see the knowledge and experience behind each action. Where did you learn to do all this? She asked. Earth's a tough planet in a lot of ways, Marcus said. Humans had to learn to survive in all kinds of environments. Deserts, frozen wastelands, jungles, mountains. Every human grows up learning basic survival skills. Even the wealthy ones. Even royalty, Marcus laughed. We don't really have royalty anymore. And even the wealthy ones learn this stuff. You never know when you might need it. That concept was completely alien to Zarakai. Ethereal nobles learned history, politics, science, and the arts. Physical survival was left to the lower classes. The idea that advanced beings would learn to make fire with sticks seemed primitive and unnecessary. But she was alive because Marcus knew how to do primitive and unnecessary things. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Marcus would go out hunting and foraging while Zarakai stayed near the cave, using her telepathy to watch for predators. When he returned, he would teach her what he had learned about the local environment. These berries are safe if you eat them before they turn dark red, he explained on the 3rd day. But once they're fully ripe, they produce a toxin that causes paralysis. The local birds wait for them to ripen because they're immune to the toxin. How do you know all this? I tested it, first on dead tissue, then on small samples, then on myself in tiny amounts. He showed her a notebook where he had been recording everything he learned. Scientific method. Make a hypothesis, test it carefully, record the results. Zarakai was amazed by the notebook. Every page was covered with detailed observations about plants, animals, weather patterns, and safe travel routes. In less than a week, Marcus had learned more about the planet than she had discovered in 3 months. Ethereals would use scanning, devices, and computer analysis for this kind of research, she said. Probably faster that way, Marcus agreed. But I don't have scanning devices, so I use what I do have. Eyes, brain, and patience. As the days passed, Zarakai began to understand why Marcus seemed so confident in dangerous situations. Humans might not have telepathy or energy manipulation, but they had something else. The ability to adapt to anything. Where ethereals would use technology to solve problems, humans would find ways to work with what they had. Marcus showed her how to build better shelters using the natural materials around them. He taught her to read animal tracks and weather signs. Most importantly, he showed her how to think like the creatures they were trying to avoid. Predators are lazy, he explained as they watched a pack of wolf-like creatures hunting in the distance. They want easy prey. If you make yourself look dangerous or difficult to catch, they'll usually find something else to hunt. The Thornmaws did not think I was too difficult. That's because you were acting like prey, running, hiding, using energy to escape instead of fighting back. To them, you were just a slow, weak creature that would tire out eventually. Marcus grinned. Now you know how to fight back. He had been teaching her to use the weapons he had made from local materials. Simple spears, throwing sticks, and basic traps. Zarakai's energy powers were much more advanced than anything Marcus could create. But his weapons had one big advantage. They did not make her tired to use. Energy manipulation is powerful, Marcus said as they practiced with wooden spears. But it's like having a laser cannon that runs on your own body heat. Great for emergencies, but you can't use it all day long. Ethereals use enhancement chambers and power cells to avoid that problem. And when you don't have enhancement chambers and power cells? Zarakai threw her spear at a tree trunk and missed by several inches. Then you learn to use sticks and rocks like a primitive being. Hey now, Marcus said with mock offense. These primitive tools have kept humans alive for thousands of years. Don't knock them until you've mastered them. Their partnership was not always smooth. Zarakai struggled with the physical demands of wilderness survival. Her body was not built for climbing trees, carrying heavy loads, or fighting with crude weapons. Marcus sometimes grew impatient with what he saw as her privileged background. You've never cooked your own food? He asked in disbelief when she nearly poisoned them both by preparing the wrong kind of root. Servants prepared my meals, Zarakai said defensively. I studied more important things. More important than knowing what you can and can't eat safely? I studied galactic history, xenobiology, political theory, advanced mathematics. All useful subjects, Marcus said. But not much help when you're starving in a forest. But their differences also made them stronger. Zarakai's telepathy could detect dangers long before Marcus's normal senses picked them up. Her energy manipulation could solve problems that physical tools could not handle. When Marcus injured his leg falling from a tree, she was able to heal the wound in minutes. That's incredibly useful, Marcus said, watching the cut close without even leaving a scar. How does it work? I manipulate the electrical and chemical processes in living tissue to accelerate natural healing, Zarakai explained. All ethereals can do basic healing, though medical specialists are much more skilled. Could you teach it to someone without telepathy? I do not know. No one has ever asked that question before. Really? Your people never wondered if other species might be able to learn ethereal techniques? Zarakai thought about that. Other species are considered too primitive to understand our methods. But you just explained it to me in terms I could understand. Electrical and chemical manipulation of tissue. That's just advanced medicine. For the first time, Zarakai began to wonder if her people's assumptions about other species might be wrong. Marcus clearly was not primitive. His methods were different from ethereal techniques, but they were based on the same logical principles. He observed, hypothesized, tested, and adapted. That was exactly what ethereal scientists did, just without the advanced technology. After 2 weeks together, they had created a comfortable camp near the cave. Marcus had built additional shelters and storage areas. Zarakai had used her powers to create permanent heat sources and water purification systems. They had mapped the safe travel routes in their area and established warning systems to detect approaching predators. Most importantly, they had learned to work together. Marcus would spot problems and develop solutions using available resources. Zarakai would use her abilities to implement his ideas or suggest improvements based on her scientific knowledge. You know, Marcus said one evening as they sat by their fire, this is actually kind of nice. I mean, the constant threat of death is not great, but the teamwork part is working out well. I have never worked with anyone like this before, Zarakai admitted. Ethereals usually work alone or in rigid hierarchies. This cooperation is new to me. It's the human way. We're social creatures. We do better when we work together, even with aliens, even with people who are completely different from you. Marcus looked at her with genuine surprise, especially with people who are different from us. Different perspectives, different skills, different ways of thinking about problems. That's how you get really creative solutions. That night, Zarakai lay awake thinking about Marcus's words. Her father had taught her that differences between species were weaknesses to be exploited or eliminated. But Marcus seemed to think differences were strengths to be celebrated and utilized. What if her father was wrong? What if the ethereal way was not the only way, or even the best way? She was about to find out because their peaceful routine was about to be shattered. Unknown to either of them, an ethereal patrol ship had detected Marcus's crashed vessel and was coming to investigate. The comfortable world they had built together was about to collide with the harsh realities of galactic politics, but that confrontation would also give Zarakai the chance to prove that cooperation between species was not just possible, it was the key to survival. The ethereal patrol ship appeared in the sky like a silver knife cutting through the clouds. Zarakai saw it first, her telepathy picking up the familiar mental patterns of her own people from miles away. The ship was small but fast, designed for reconnaissance and quick strikes. It was exactly the kind of vessel her father would send to hunt down escaped prisoners or investigate unknown threats. "Marcus," she called urgently, "we have a problem." He looked up from the water filter he was repairing and followed her gaze to the sky. The ship was still distant but growing larger as it approached their area of the forest. "Friends of yours?" he asked. "Patrol ship. They are probably investigating your crashed vessel." Zarakai's mind raced through possibilities. "They will scan the area for survivors. When they find you, they'll kill me," Marcus finished calmly. "Yeah, I figured that might happen eventually. Your people don't seem like the type to take prisoners." "Not usually, no." Zarakai watched the ship circle over the crash site several miles away. "But there might be another way." She turned to face Marcus, her expression serious. "I could claim to have captured you. Tell them I survived by taking a prisoner who could help me hunt and gather food. It would explain why I'm still alive after 3 months." Marcus considered this. Would they believe it? Maybe. Ethereals sometimes use skilled prisoners as temporary servants. "It would not be completely unusual," she paused, "but it would mean pretending you are my slave. You would have to act submissive and obedient." "I can act," Marcus said. "The question is, what happens after they believe your story?" "I do not know. They might take us both back to ethereal space. They might kill you anyway. They might decide I am still too dangerous and leave us both here." The ship was getting closer. Soon it would detect their camp and investigate. "There's another option," Marcus said slowly. "What if we tell them the truth?" "The truth?" "That cooperation works better than domination. That humans and ethereals can accomplish more working together than either species can alone." Zarakai stared at him. "They will never believe that." "Then we'll have to prove it." The patrol ship settled into a clearing about half a mile from their camp. Zarakai could sense 3 ethereal minds on board, a captain and 2 soldiers. They were cautious but not overly concerned. To them this was just a routine investigation of a crashed alien vessel. "Whatever we do, we need to do it now," Marcus said, "before they start scanning for life signs." Zarakai made her decision. "We try your plan first. If it fails, we fall back to the prisoner story." They walked through the forest toward the patrol ship, moving openly so they would be detected by the ship's sensors. Zarakai reached out with her telepathy to announce their approach. "Ethereal patrol vessel, this is Princess Zarakai. I am approaching your position with important information." The response came immediately, filled with surprise and disbelief. "Princess, you were reported dead. How did you survive on this death world? I will explain when we meet. But know that I have learned something important about the galaxy and our place in it." The ship's captain was a middle-aged ethereal named Veltar. Zarakai remembered him from the Imperial fleet, a competent officer who followed orders without question. He stood at the bottom of his ship's ramp with his 2 soldiers, all of them staring in amazement at the former princess. "Your Imperial Highness," Veltar said formally, We thought you were dead. The Emperor said you had been executed for treason." The Emperor chose to lie rather than admit he had banished his own daughter. Zarakai replied, "But I did not come here to discuss my father's politics. I came to show you something that could change everything." She gestured to Marcus, who had been standing quietly beside her. "This is Marcus Chen. He is human." The soldiers immediately raised their weapons, energy rifles humming with power. Veltar's hand moved to his sidearm. "A human?" Veltar's mental voice was filled with alarm. "Here? How?" "His ship crashed several weeks ago. He has been surviving in this wilderness using only primitive tools and his intelligence." "Surviving?" One of the soldiers spoke aloud, his voice skeptical. "Nothing survives here for more than a few days. Our scouts reported that even our own people cannot last a week in these forests." "That is what I thought too," Zarakai said, "but I was wrong. Marcus has not just survived, he has thrived, and he taught me to do the same." She began to explain what she had learned over the past month. How Marcus had defeated creatures that terrorized even ethereal military units. How he had developed solutions to problems using only local resources. How his methods, combined with her abilities, had allowed them to not just survive but create a sustainable life in one of the most dangerous environments in the galaxy. "Impossible," Veltar said when she finished. "Humans are barely intelligent. They have no telepathy, no energy manipulation, no advanced technology. They are animals with just enough intelligence to use simple tools." "Then explain this," Zarakai said. She pulled out Marcus's notebook and handed it to the captain. 3 weeks of detailed observations about this planet's ecosystem. Analysis of predator behavior, plant chemistry, weather patterns, and resource management. Tell me this is the work of an unintelligent animal. Veltar flipped through the pages, his expression growing more confused with each page. The notebook contained more useful information about the planet than ethereal scout reports from multiple expeditions. How do we know the human did not steal this information from somewhere? The first soldier asked. Because I watched him gather it, Zarakai said. I watched him test every hypothesis and verify every conclusion. I watched him develop new theories based on observation and experimentation. It is the same scientific method we use, just without advanced equipment. Even if that is true, Veltar said, it does not change the fundamental fact that humans are an inferior species. One clever individual does not represent their entire civilization. What if it does? Zarakai asked. What if we have been wrong about humans? What if we have been wrong about all the species we have conquered? The conversation continued for an hour. Veltar and his soldiers asked detailed questions about survival techniques, predator behavior, and resource management. Despite their prejudices, they could not deny that Marcus's methods worked. Finally, Marcus spoke for the first time since the conversation began. Captain Veltar, may I ask you a question? The ethereal officer looked surprised to be addressed directly by a human. You may speak. How many of your people have successfully established permanent settlements on worlds like this? Worlds this dangerous? None. The Imperial fleet classifies such planets as unsuitable for colonization. And yet, working together, Princess Zarakai and I have done exactly that. We have created a sustainable settlement with reliable food sources, effective defenses, and comfortable shelter. In just 1 month. Marcus stepped forward, ignoring the weapon still pointed at him. You can kill me if you want. But that won't change what we've accomplished here, and it won't change the fact that humans and ethereals working together can do things that neither species can do alone. What are you proposing? Veltar asked. A new approach, Zarakai said. Instead of conquering and enslaving other species, what if we offered them partnership? What if we combined ethereal technology with human adaptability, or ethereal telepathy with the unique abilities of other species? The Emperor would never agree to such a thing. The Emperor is not here, Zarakai said firmly. You are. You have seen the evidence with your own eyes. You have to decide what to do with that information. Veltar was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he lowered his weapon and signaled his soldiers to do the same. I will take you both back to Imperial space, he said, but not as prisoners, as consultants. There are others in the fleet who have questions about our current policies. Others who think there might be better ways to deal with alien species. A resistance movement? Zarakai asked. A group of officers who believe in the Empire but question some of its methods. We have been waiting for an alternative to conquest. Perhaps you have found one. 6 months later, Zarakai stood in a conference room aboard an Imperial fleet vessel. The room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, humans, ethereals, and many others who had once been enemies. They were planning the first interspecies cooperative colony, using techniques developed by Marcus and refined by ethereal scientists. Marcus sat beside her, no longer a prisoner or a curiosity, but a respected partner in building something new. His ideas about cooperation and adaptation had spread through the fleet, inspiring others to question old assumptions and try new approaches. You know, he said quietly as they watched the conference proceed. I never thought getting stranded on a death world would lead to this. I never thought questioning my father would lead to changing the galaxy, Zarakai replied. But that is what cooperation does. It creates possibilities that no one could imagine alone. Outside the viewports, ships from a dozen different species flew in formation, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners working toward a common goal. It was not the galaxy Zarakai had grown up in, but it was the galaxy she had always hoped could exist. And it had all started with a simple truth that humans understood better than anyone, that strength comes not from dominating others,